What happens when a Hollywood star walks onto one of America's most beloved morning shows and decides that the rules don't apply to him? In just 38 seconds, Joe Keery went from guest to gone, escorted off the Good Morning America set after launching into a tirade that left Michael Strahan speechless and the studio audience gasping. This was supposed to be a simple interview, a friendly chat about upcoming projects, maybe some laughs, the kind of easy television that fills living rooms across the country every single morning. But Joe Keery had other plans. And what started as a routine conversation turned into one of the most shocking exits in morning television history. The morning began like any other at Good Morning America. The lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and Michael Strahan sat in his chair with that signature smile, ready to welcome another guest. Joe Keery walked out to applause, waving to the audience, looking every bit the charming actor everyone expected. He sat down, shook Michael's hand, and for the first few minutes, everything seemed perfectly normal. Michael started with the basics. "So great to have you here, Joe. Thanks for joining us this morning." Joe nodded, settling into his seat. "Happy to be here. Let's talk about what you've been working on lately. I know the fans are excited to hear what's next for you." And that's when the first sign of trouble appeared. Joe shifted in his seat, and instead of answering the question, he looked directly at Michael and said, "You know what, Michael? I'm actually not here to talk about that." Michael's smile faltered for just a second. He's a professional, though, someone who's handled thousands of interviews. He adjusted quickly. "Oh, okay. Well, what would you like to talk about?" Joe leaned back, crossing his arms. "I want to talk about how this show treats its guests. I want to talk about the lack of respect." The audience went quiet. You could feel the energy in the studio shift. Michael kept his composure, his voice steady and calm. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Joe. We have nothing but respect for everyone who comes on this show. Can you help me understand what's bothering you?" "Your green room," Joe said, his voice rising slightly. "I was back there for 20 minutes. 20 minutes, Michael. And nobody offered me anything. No water, no coffee, nothing." Michael blinked. "I apologize if our staff didn't get to you right away. We have a lot going on during the show, but that's no excuse. We'll make sure that doesn't happen again." It was a gracious response. Kind, understanding, professional. But Joe wasn't having it. "That's not good enough," Joe snapped. "Do you know who I am? Do you know how many interviews I could be doing right now instead of sitting here?" The audience murmured. A few uncomfortable laughs broke the tension, but they died quickly. Michael's smile was gone now, replaced with a look of genuine concern. "Joe, I understand you're upset, but we invited you here because we value you and your work. We want our viewers to get to know you better." "Value me?" Joe laughed, but there was no humor in it. "If you valued me, I wouldn't have been sitting in that sad little room waiting while your staff ignored me." Michael took a breath. "Again, I apologize for that. But right now, we're live on television, and we have millions of people watching who tuned in to hear from you. Can we talk about your projects? That's what they want to know about." Joe stood up. Actually stood up, right there in the middle of the interview. "You know what your problem is, Michael? You think you can just smile and everything's fine? You think that charm gets you out of everything?" The camera operators didn't know where to point. The producers in the control room were scrambling. Michael remained seated, his hands folded calmly on the desk. "Joe, I think maybe we should take a breath here. If you want to sit back down, we can start over." "A fresh start." "I don't want to start over," Joe said, his voice getting louder. "I want you to admit that this show is a joke, that you parade celebrities out here like circus animals and expect us to just smile and play along." Michael stood up now too, his tall frame towering over the desk, but his voice stayed level, stayed professional. "That's not what we do here, and I think you know that. We celebrate people's work. We have conversations. We try to bring a little joy to people's mornings. Joy? Joe scoffed. You want to talk about joy? How about the joy of being treated like a human being, instead of just another name on your booking sheet? We treat everyone with respect here, Michael said firmly. Everyone. And I'm trying to extend that same respect to you right now, even though you're making it very difficult. Joe took a step closer to Michael's desk. Difficult? You haven't seen difficult. You sit here in your comfortable chair with your comfortable life, and you have no idea what it's like out there. Michael's jaw tightened. Joe, I've worked hard to get where I am, just like you have, and I've never once treated anyone the way you're treating me right now. Oh, here we go. Joe threw his hands up. The humble Michael Strahan speech. Tell me, do you practice that in the mirror? The audience gasped. This had gone way beyond awkward. This was painful to watch. Michael shook his head slowly. I'm going to ask you one more time to sit down so we can have a respectful conversation. If you can't do that, then I think it's time for you to leave. You're going to kick me off? Joe's eyes went wide with mock surprise. The great Michael Strahan is going to kick a guest off his show? That's going to look real good for you. This isn't about me, Michael said quietly. This is about you coming onto our show and disrespecting our staff, our audience, and this program. I've been patient. I've been understanding, but I won't let you continue to behave this way. Joe pointed a finger at Michael. You think you're better than me. That's what this is really about. You think because you played football and now you're on TV that you're somehow superior. I have never thought that, Michael said, his voice carrying real emotion now. I welcome everyone who comes on this show with the same energy, the same respect. But respect goes both ways. On Joe. Respect, Joe muttered. You don't know the first thing about respect. You know what respect is? Respect is having a decent green room. Respect is having someone there to greet your guests. Respect is not making people feel like they're an inconvenience. Michael spread his hands, and I've apologized for that. Multiple times. What more do you want from me? I want you to admit that this whole thing is fake, Joe said. That these interviews are meaningless. That you don't actually care about any of the people who sit in that chair. That's not true, Michael said, and you could hear the hurt in his voice. That's not true at all. I care about every single person who comes here. I care about their stories, their work, their lives. And I'm sorry you can't see that. Joe laughed again, that same bitter laugh. Of course you'd say that. You have to say that. That's your job. No, Michael said, his voice rising for the first time. My job is to have conversations, to connect with people, to make them feel comfortable. And I've tried to do that with you today. But you came out here with an agenda, and nothing I say is going to change your mind. Finally, Joe said. Finally, you're being honest. See? That wasn't so hard, was it? Michael looked off camera, presumably at his producers, then back at Joe. I think we're done here. Oh, you think we're done? Joe crossed his arms again. I'll tell you when we're done. No, Michael said firmly. I'm telling you we're done. This interview is over. Joe's face flushed red. You can't do that. I absolutely can, Michael said. This is our show, and I'm asking you to leave. And now, make me, Joe said, and the audience went completely silent. Michael didn't move. He just looked at Joe with an expression of disappointment and sadness. I'm not going to make you do anything, but security is going to come out here, and they're going to escort you off the set. You can walk out with dignity, or you can make this even worse than it already is. The choice is yours. Joe looked around at the audience, at the cameras, at Michael. For a moment, it seemed like he might actually back down, but then his face hardened. You know what, Michael? You're pathetic. This show is pathetic, and everyone watching this right now knows it. We're going to commercial, Michael said loudly, and the cameras started to pull away. But Joe wasn't finished. That's right. Run away. Hide behind your commercial break. That's all you know how to do. 2 security guards appeared from the wings. They approached Joe carefully, professionally. "Sir, we need you to come with us," one of them said quietly. Joe spun around to face them. "Are you kidding me right now? You're actually going to throw me out?" "Sir, please," the guard said. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Michael stood at his desk, watching the scene unfold with his arms crossed. His face was a mixture of anger and sadness. This wasn't how anyone wanted this to go. Joe looked back at Michael one more time. "You're going to regret this. The only person who should have regrets right now is you," Michael said quietly. The security guards gently took Joe by the arms. He didn't resist, but he kept talking. "This is ridiculous. You can't treat people like this. I'm going to tell everyone about this. Everyone is going to know what a fraud you are, Michael." Michael didn't respond. He just watched as the guards led Joe toward the exit. As they reached the edge of the stage, Joe turned back one final time. "You think you won? You didn't win anything. All you did was show everyone watching what kind of person you really are." "I think they saw exactly what kind of person I am," Michael said. "Someone who tried to give you every opportunity to act like a professional, and you threw it back in my face." Joe opened his mouth to respond, but one of the security guards spoke first. "Sir, we really need to go now." And with that, Joe Keery was led off the Good Morning America stage. The audience sat in stunned silence. Michael took a deep breath, straightened his jacket, and looked directly into the camera. "Well," he said, his voice steady despite everything that had just happened. "That's not how we usually do things around here. I apologize to everyone watching at home. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue with our show." But before they could cut away, Michael added one more thing. "You know, we've had thousands of guests on this show over the years. Actors, musicians, athletes, politicians, regular people with extraordinary stories. And 99.9% of them have been kind, gracious, and wonderful to talk to. It's disappointing when someone comes on and chooses to act the way our last guest did. But it doesn't change who we are, or what we do here. We're going to keep welcoming people, keep having great conversations, and keep trying to brighten your mornings." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a scripted response. This was Michael Strahan speaking from the heart. "We'll be right back," he said, and the cameras finally cut away. In the control room, producers were frantically trying to figure out what to do next. Should they address it when they came back from commercial? Should they pretend it never happened? Should they issue a statement? But Michael had already made his decision. When the show returned from break, he did exactly what he said he would do. He continued with the program. There was another guest scheduled, a chef demonstrating a new recipe, and Michael welcomed her with the same warmth and enthusiasm he brought to every interview. If you didn't know what had just happened, you'd never guess that anything was wrong. That's the mark of a true professional. The ability to keep going, to not let one bad moment derail everything else. The audience could see it too. They could see Michael's grace under pressure. The way he handled Joe's outburst with patience and firmness. The way he gave Joe multiple chances to correct course. The way he only asked him to leave when it became absolutely necessary. Back in the green room that had started this whole mess, the staff was shaken. They kept replaying the incident in their minds. Had they really ignored Joe? Had they been disrespectful? They didn't think so, but the accusation stung nonetheless. One of the production assistants spoke up. "I offered him coffee as soon as he arrived. He said he didn't want anything." Another staff member nodded. "I asked if he needed anything else. He said he was fine." It became clear that Joe's complaints weren't based in reality. He'd been offered refreshments. He'd been attended to, but for whatever reason, he decided to create a narrative that simply wasn't true. On stage, Michael was laughing with the chef about a cooking mishap. The tension from earlier had dissipated. The show was back on track. But everyone knew this moment would be talked about for days, maybe weeks. Social media was already exploding. People who had watched the incident live were sharing their reactions. Some couldn't believe what they'd seen. Others were praising Michael for how he handled it. A few were trying to defend Joe, but they were in the minority. The phrase, "respect goes both ways," that Michael had used was trending. People were quoting it, sharing it, using it in their own contexts. It had struck a chord. Because at its core, that's what this whole incident was about. Respect, or the lack thereof. Joe had come onto the show expecting to be treated a certain way. When his expectations weren't met, whether those expectations were reasonable or not, he lashed out. He didn't consider that maybe the staff was busy, that maybe they were dealing with multiple guests and multiple segments, that maybe a 20-minute wait wasn't actually a sign of disrespect, but just the reality of live television. And when Michael tried to apologize, tried to move forward, tried to salvage the interview, Joe doubled down. He made it personal. He attacked Michael's character, his integrity, his authenticity. But Michael never stooped to that level. He stayed professional. He stayed calm. He gave Joe every chance to walk back his behavior. It was only when Joe refused to show basic decency that Michael made the call to end the interview. And even then, he did it with class. He didn't yell. He didn't insult. He simply stated that the interview was over and asked Joe to leave. The contrast between the two men couldn't have been clearer. On one side, you had someone who felt entitled to special treatment and threw a tantrum when he didn't get it. On the other side, you had someone who maintained his composure and his values, even in the face of unwarranted attacks. As the show continued, Michael interviewed the chef, then moved on to a segment about a local charity. He gave each topic his full attention, as if the blow-up with Joe had never happened. That ability to compartmentalize, to not let one negative experience color everything else, is rare. The studio audience could sense it too. There was a respect in the room that hadn't been there before. They'd seen Michael tested in a way most hosts never are, and they'd seen him pass that test with flying colors. When the show finally ended and the cameras stopped rolling, Michael let out a long breath. The smile faded from his face, replaced with exhaustion. He'd held it together for the cameras, for the audience, for the show. But it had taken its toll. His co-hosts gathered around him, offering support and reassurance. "You handled that perfectly," one of them said. Michael shook his head. "I just wish it hadn't happened at all." "But it did happen," another co-host said. "And you showed everyone watching what real professionalism looks like." The producers came out from the control room. They were already getting calls from news outlets wanting to know what happened, wanting statements, wanting interviews about the interview. Michael waved them off. "We're not making a big deal out of this. It happened, we moved on, and that's the end of it." But of course, it wasn't the end of it. Not really. Because moments like this don't just disappear. They live on in clips and screenshots and social media posts. They become part of the cultural conversation. And in this case, the conversation was overwhelmingly in Michael's favor. People recognized that he'd been put in an impossible situation and had navigated it with grace. The green room staff was still upset, still processing what had happened. Michael made a point to find them before he left for the day. "I want you all to know that you did nothing wrong," he told them. "You were professional and courteous, just like you always are. What happened out there had nothing to do with you." One of the assistants, a young woman who'd only been working there for a few months, had tears in her eyes. "But he said we ignored him. He said we were disrespectful." Michael put a hand on her shoulder. "He said a lot of things that weren't true. Don't let his words make you doubt yourself. I know how hard you all work. I see it every single day. The gesture meant everything to the staff. They'd been worried that they'd somehow caused the incident, that they'd let Michael down. His reassurance lifted that weight. As Michael finally left the studio that day, he thought about all the interviews he'd done over the years. The good ones, the awkward ones, the funny ones. But this one would stick with him differently. Not because of how it ended, but because of what it revealed. It revealed that no matter how famous someone is, no matter how talented, character still matters. Kindness still matters. Basic human decency still matters. Joe Keery had walked onto that stage with a chip on his shoulder and an axe to grind. Maybe he was having a bad day. Maybe something else was going on in his life. Or maybe this is just who he is when cameras are rolling and he thinks he can get away with it. But Michael Strahan had shown that you don't have to sink to someone else's level. You don't have to match hostility with hostility. You can stand firm in your values while still treating someone with basic respect, even when they're not returning the favor. The interaction lasted less than 15 minutes from start to finish. 15 minutes that felt like hours to everyone watching. 15 minutes that would be dissected and analyzed and discussed. But in those 15 minutes, viewers saw something important. They saw that being the bigger person isn't about letting people walk all over you. It's about maintaining your integrity while also setting boundaries. Michael had tried to de-escalate. He'd apologized. He'd offered multiple chances for the conversation to get back on track. But he'd also known when enough was enough. When Joe crossed the line from upset to abusive, Michael didn't hesitate to end the interview. That's leadership. That's strength. Not the loud, aggressive kind of strength that Joe had displayed, but the quiet, confident kind that doesn't need to prove itself through volume or threats. The audience had seen it. The staff had seen it. And America had seen it. As the day wound down and the clip of the incident spread across the internet, people kept coming back to the same observation. Michael Strahan is exactly who you think he is. Professional, kind, patient, but not a pushback. Someone who will give you every opportunity to do the right thing, but won't tolerate being disrespected or watching his team be disrespected. And Joe Keery? He'd shown a side of himself that nobody had expected to see. The charming actor who usually smiled for cameras and gave pleasant interviews had revealed something else entirely. An entitlement, an arrogance, a willingness to lash out when things didn't go exactly his way. The 38 seconds it took for things to go from uncomfortable to catastrophic would be replayed over and over. People would point to the exact moment when Joe's tone shifted, when his frustration turned to aggression, when a salvable situation became unsalvageable. But they'd also replay Michael's responses, his calm voice, his steady demeanor, his refusal to be baited into an argument, his clear boundary setting. In the end, the incident became a master class in how to handle conflict, not by avoiding it or pretending everything is fine, but by addressing it directly while maintaining your composure and your principles. The Good Morning America studio would host hundreds more interviews in the weeks and months to come. Most of them would be pleasant and forgettable in the best way. Conversations that informed and entertained without drama or conflict. But everyone who worked there would remember the day Joe Keery walked onto their stage and chose chaos. And they'd remember how Michael Strahan showed them what it means to be a true professional, even when someone is doing everything in their power to make that impossible. The coffee that wasn't offered, the water that didn't appear, the 20-minute wait that sparked such outrage turned out to be figments of an entitled imagination. But the lesson that came from that false grievance was very real. Treat people with respect. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Try to understand their perspective, but also know your worth. Know when to draw the line. Know when someone is taking advantage of your kindness. Michael Strahan knew all of that, And on that day, in front of millions of viewers, he demonstrated it perfectly. Not with a script or a plan, but with instinct born from years of experience and a solid foundation of character. Joe Keery was escorted off the set, out of the building, and into a car that would take him far away from Good Morning America. The security guards who walked him out did so professionally, without drama, just as they'd been trained. And Michael Strahan went right back to work, proving that one person's bad behavior doesn't have to derail an entire show, an entire day, or an entire mission to bring a little joy to people's mornings. That's what happens when someone mistakes kindness for weakness, when they think patience means pushover, and when they believe their status gives them permission to treat others poorly. They learn often too late that some people can't be shaken, can't be bullied, can't be made to compromise their values, no matter how loud the shouting gets. Michael Strahan is one of those people. And on that unforgettable morning, America got to see exactly what that looks like in action.